some kind of hotel and mixed-use project that would be at street level, so that there'd be some kind of retail that'd be visual, and obviously behind the hotel would be a visual block of the sewage treatment plant, because it's a bit of an eyesore. So you can see this is what our attempt to sort of portray that. Obviously, it doesn't have to be a hotel, but one of the fundamentals that was important to our table, at least as we were discussing it, was that we maximize access to the waterfront in terms of pedestrian and bicycle paths along the water, and that as you're going further west and south into downtown New Rochelle, that whatever streets are being used to divide up this space, that they create an opportunity for a visual of the water. Because obviously nobody sees the water right now, and it's spectacular to see Long Island Sound. So wherever they place roads and streets, that be a high priority, that you can see from the street landscape gateways to the water. Obviously, the developer has to make a return on investment, so I guess nobody at our table was concerned about how high these buildings should be, but obviously some kind of mid-rise building would seem to be appropriate, whether it's, you know, from 7 to 12 or 13 or 14 stories. It doesn't really matter to us if they're terraced or if they're different levels. The idea is that I guess you think that's too good. The idea would be that there has to be enough density to support the retail at the ground floor. And we don't have a lot of retail in New Rochelle, so the idea would be that there'd be retail, you know, along the street or along the streets. And you're not going to get that retail unless you have enough people that are obviously patronizing the businesses. At the western end of the center section is the Armory. The consensus in our table was that we have something like the idea like a Chelsea Market or a St. Lawrence Market in Toronto, if you know it, or the Seattle equivalent, but there'd be a multi-vendor, permanent food and restaurant and eatery and, you know, butchery, bakeries, etc. Using that space as an architectural gateway into a bigger building, because it's not big enough on its own. And then there's this last section here, and there's some differences of opinion, but the consensus that emerged was that maybe there should be some kind of cultural institution, an aquarium, a museum, something that would attract tourist use and would make the area bring in people that are not there permanently, but tourists and so forth. And I think there's a few other ideas.
Well, so trying to make this waterway, I don't know whether or not dredging is going to be part of the plan to make this a waterway, not so much for field boats, but make it usable for kayaking and that sort of thing, and to also make it a little more beautiful, because at low tide it's just mud flat, so it's not very appealing. But to try to put it down here, so that when the tide comes in, the water stays there, or something like that. But one of the things that we talked about was to make this access for Echo an access point for the whole space, with a bike path that would travel around the edge of the property, so that you could get to 5 Islands Park. We also talked about, because of the Sutton Manor resistance and cooperation, this area would be more of the low rise, because it would be easier to get cooperation from these folks and the folks over here if this would be not high rise.
That's like blockage, etc.
We also discussed the idea that there has to be parking, especially if you're going to put something that's going to draw up a crowd. You have to have parking, but the idea is that 30 years from now, we're not going to have cars. We're going to have driverless cars.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to park cars anymore, so that any parking planning should be done with the idea that there could be an alternative use for that space 25, 30 years from now, because this property should be here that long. So that part of the planning objectives would be to be able to repurpose that space.
At least have parking as invisible as possible.
And make the parking as invisible as possible. And one is to make green roofs wherever possible so that there can be actual parks on the roofs that are not only environmentally good idea, but they're also good use. And so that the visuals, when you're driving down Main Street, would all point to the focal point here, where the water is, so that you would get the perspective that New Rochelle is connected to the water. And I think that's about it. Realizes that there is a considerable vertical change from the street to here, which could support the higher rise buildings, an extra floor or two down closer to the water without appearing as tall buildings from Main Street, so that you could taper the building so that it went down, so you could get more square footage down closer to the water.